Cool. So hi, everyone. My name's Takara Baker, and I work for Adobe on our AdCloud product. I'm actually located in our London office and head up product marketing for AdCloud. So I'm going to talk to you about a topic that's really important for us on the AdCloud side this year and just for advertising at Adobe, which is just the reality of connecting AdTech and MarTech. And I'd like to start first just with the overall goal of brands, of you all, which is that it's very important to deliver a consistent and a personalized experience. We know that customers want this, consumers want this. We know that providing the best experience is just the ultimate goal. However, across the landscape and across the ecosystem, we have an issue when it comes to fragmentation. There are so many different areas that are fragmented for brands and for advertisers, whether that's through how you start to connect data, how you really start to connect campaigns and leverage an always-on or an iteration strategy, and also how you start to connect technology, because ultimately when you're able to do that, you can really start to deliver on this promise of delivering a connected and a personalized experience for a consumer. And it's not just these areas. We know that screens have exploded, right, across the various number of years. In the last 20 years, we've had various screens and formats in different places in which eyeballs are kind of looking, right, or which consumers are spending their time. And at the same time, the consumer journey has changed. Essentially, we no longer can move them down a simple funnel, but there are so many different touch points in which a consumer can interact with a brand that in many ways, even us, you can start to choose your own journey. And it's up to a brand to really kind of meet that journey of the consumer instead of driving or creating what that journey looks like. And then media is siloed. We have walled gardens, we have different pockets of inventory that won't necessarily speak to one another. And then at the same time, to further this fragmentation idea, many companies that I talk to, their teams at the board level and specifically within marketing are also siloed. And they're using kind of different pieces of technology and maybe aren't necessarily talking to one another or don't necessarily have the same goalposts. And so ultimately, we can end up with this from an advertising perspective, which means that consumers are kind of bombarded with various messages that are coming from either the marketing team, the advertising team. They're not as personalized as we would like them to be, and they can be pretty frustrating. So how do we what does this look like? So there's technology and there are teams. And I really like this slide because it starts to break down just how convoluted it can get. From an advertising perspective, there are so many different teams and kind of knowledge experts that represent these pockets of either formats or pieces of inventory. And they are probably using different pieces of technology to actually access this inventory. And then on top of that, there are so many different areas that are really important to understanding the success of how this inventory is working, whether that's from a planning or reporting or optimization perspective. And there are usually teams and people that are using different pieces of technology to be successful at this. And then you have teams. And usually we see teams separated out between performance and branding. We're starting to see that really change in many ways, but a lot of times I see them separated out in this way. And then you have the teams that kind of layer across that. And so it becomes a pretty massive kind of complex matrix of teams and technology and different things that they're leveraging and using and different ways in which they're analyzing success. And in many ways, it can start to be confusing, especially when you look at a Lumascape. I think that the man who invented Lumascapes is here, and so I was hoping he wasn't in this session because I always say that this is like a complete shit show of just so much stuff. So I hope he's not in here. But it's saying he did a good job of the visualization of it, but there's so much stuff, right? And there's so many different tools that you can leverage and use across these various teams in different areas. And ultimately, it can create some complexity when you start to leverage and look at point solutions. And it's really important to start to understand how do these various pieces of technology talk to each other? How can you start to manage this data? And how can you really move towards this new age of managing that journey of the customer and doing so in a really seamless way across your business? And it's all about developing experiences, not exposures, for consumers. So what I like to showcase is this, which is just kind of I would say, just an overview of a tech stack. And the first step for many of the brands that I talk to or that we talk to is just, do you even know kind of what your teams are using? Do you know kind of what their goals are? Do you know how they share data? Do you know if your creative tools can actually work with your demand-side tools? Like, how do they integrate together? It's a really good exercise to start to look at kind of all these various areas from, I would say, an advertising and marketing perspective, and get a grasp on and a handle on what's really happening within your own business and within your own tech stack. And when you start to converge all these together and converge what we like to call AdTech and MarTech, and really kind of have your CRM data and your advertising data and your marketing data speaking to one another and your investment really working with one another, that's when you can start to really think through and develop a journey and manage the journey of consumers using technology and using data. And we, at Adobe, we do this survey every year. This is an e-consultancy trends report. And we asked organizations kind of what's their approach to marketing and customer experience technology. And we separated out the answers by customer experience leaders and then others. So people that really say that they're advanced, they raise their hand and state that they're advanced. And it's interesting here. I think, in general, people that are leaders, I really haven't seen tons of people that have a highly integrated stack, but some people do. They know their tech stack. They know they have it fully integrated. They're able to start to do some journey management. But really, a lot of people are actually where others are, which is just a fragmented approach. They're realizing that maybe various pieces of technology aren't speaking to each other. They might have some best-in-breed stuff that they like in one place, but it doesn't work with something else. And so it's creating inconsistencies for them within their business. A couple other questions that we asked that I thought were interesting, which were, what are the 3 areas that you expect to become priorities for you in 2019? And when we look at the priorities, the top, I would say 4, all of them really talk about how you start to better use data, better sort of improve your customer intelligence and gain a holistic view, integrate your tools, and really understand just return on marketing investment or return on investment. And then on the flip side, we ask people, what are their 3 challenges that keep them awake at night? And they're essentially kind of the top things are actually the priorities. And I thought this was really interesting for us at Adobe because it says that people think that this is really tough to do. And for us, and for me and for my job, we need to do a better job of creating use cases and easy ways for people to feel that they can activate and do essentially and kind of leverage ways to gain a holistic view of customers and also integrate their overall data. And for us, it was just that we need to create tell a better story and a simple story of how this actually isn't as complicated as people think. So what are we doing here? We're essentially changing teams. We're merging technology, and all of that is underpinned by data, which is the most important piece. And ultimately, what you're starting to do is really drive and change process, because that can be some of the, I would say, the toughest thing to change, especially at very complex and large organizations. So first, I'm going to get into 2 areas in which we start to help and in which you can start to think about how you drive this change. And that's through workflow and insights, and then also through just actual data usage, which is segmentation and optimization. So starting first with workflow and insights. The interesting thing I would say about this one is that we're thinking through how you change workflow, how you bubble up better insights, but really what you're starting to change and transform are your teams and the technology that they're using. And that's really kind of where the work needs to happen. When we specifically talk about AdTech and MarTech conversions, 87% of brands are really thinking about this. They say they need to put more effort into providing a seamless experience across all channels. And this isn't just paid activation, but this is when you're thinking about your owned destinations and also paid investment and creating that seamless experience. At the same time, marketers feel that they have insufficient technology to get value from data. So they don't think that technology really allows them to do what they would like it to do. And hopefully I can debunk that a little bit when I talk about. So it's really a tale of 2 teams, specifically when we're talking about this topic. On the one hand, you have an analytics team. And I truly believe that analytics knowledge and analytics teams are becoming more and more important. We'll probably see something like a chief analytics officer come through and rise. It's really important to understand this and to really dig into the technology that's available. They're using some sort of their own platform. They're really focused on things like click-through data. And they use their analytics data as the source of truth. And then on the same end, you have a marketing team or even an advertising team. Usually they have to use multiple platforms because they have to execute across all these various destinations. They're looking at view-through data, and then also they use media as the source of truth. And these are two teams that are very important to someone's business that are essentially kind of reaching, you could call them customers versus like prospects, but it's, at the end of the day, like you're kind of reaching some of the same people, but they're not speaking to each other and they're not kind of working with one another and sharing data, and they don't have the same goals and ways in which they validate what they're doing, which is a problem. At the same time, when we start to look at kind of what happens from an analytics perspective, 78% of companies kind of consider themselves laggards in analytics. They're not necessarily that advanced in it, which I think is fair. It's something that's become more and more important recently. And at the same time, from a marketing perspective, 61% of companies don't have a strategy for how they actually activate their data and how they use it. They're looking at it, but they haven't really built out what that looks like yet. And so what I would say for this part, it's just really important when you're starting to think about how you start to merge these teams and their technologies. I think that we've talked about this subject enough, but people just haven't done it. And it's really important to start to get rid of politics, get out of your own way. Remove your silos, start to help the customer and just innovate yourselves. Or as we kind of see from challenger brands or direct-to-consumer brands, they kind of build this sort of strategy from the ground up. And people that are kind of still, or companies that are still stuck in how they do this, or how they start to get rid of politics and take a long time to do this, you're just hurting yourself and you're hurting your business. So it's important to move quickly on this. And overall, this is a survey that we did with Forrester. We see that when you start to focus on experience, and really when you make that the goal of your business, it is good for business. You start to see lifts in things like brand awareness, return on ad spend, and just overall faster revenue growth rates within your business. So the other piece is how you actually start to do it from a tactical perspective. What does this look like within segmentation and optimization? So we're merging teams together. We're starting to define what their goals are as a joint team. We're starting to merge our data. Now, how do we start to use it? And really, it is about data. And really, today, it's about first-party data. For all of us in Europe, we know that this is insanely important. And there were two things that have really started to push this, which is just privacy. And we see it overall in the performance. And from a privacy perspective, what I like to talk to brands about is the fact that your data and your data strategy is kind of on you. I really love, I'm from California, I'm from Oakland, California, so I love, there's a football player called Marshawn Lynch, and he used to do this thing at press conferences, and he's like, I'm just here so I don't get fined. And it's really important from a privacy perspective that you, number one, put privacy at the core at what you do, but really build out for yourselves a way in which you are managing data. One, so you don't get fined, but two, we see it in the overall performance. And this is also from eConsultancy, just looking at kind of what we see in terms of lift with data or financial justification or increase to customer lifetime value. First-party data, one, is unique to your business, is unique to you, and it is really kind of it proves out in the performance that is effective for you as a brand and as a company. So what does this actually start to look like? 85% of brands actually say their segmentation strategy is based on broad and simple clustering. So what I mean by this is actually pretty simple. So if we look at an average conversion rate, if you worked in maybe performance advertising, 0.1%, especially for, let's say, display, 0.1% is kind of like what you're going to see. In many ways, when I used to work at an agency in Chicago, if we saw something wildly over this, it wasn't like a, yay, we did a good job. It was like a, oh, shit, something is wrong. Like, what happened here, right? Like, where are the fraudulent clicks coming from? And that's a bummer. But ultimately, a lot of it is in the way in which people are using their data. And in many ways, people are using what I like to call the pointy end of the funnel to actually drive their overall optimization. There's so much more data that you can start to use. So if we start to think of a performance campaign, we have a bunch of people that we have reached that are non-converters, and then we have one person that converts. And usually the optimization happens off of this converter. You're either building lookalikes that look like this person, really trying to make that person work very hard for you, which is the pointy end of the data. However, there's a lot of kind of data that these non-converters are providing, and there are a lot of actions that people are taking from, I would say, an online perspective that you can leverage to start to optimize your campaigns and sort of widen out that audience of people that you're trying to push to take the action that you would like them to. And what this starts to look like is you can start to see things through your analytics data on your site, like time spent, page views, whether they've engaged or interacted with different areas across the site. And you can start to understand who are those kind of higher quality non-converters that you can start to optimize against that probably have a propensity to convert. And this is an example of how you can start to change your data strategy and start to merge your advertising data and your analytics data or your marketing data to really work hard for you and to be more successful for you. And this is how you start to really maximize against your first-party unique data that you have available. And the proof is actually in the numbers. So 85% of organizations who use behavioral insights to understand the customer's path to conversion generate more incremental revenue and outperform their competition by as much as 85% in sales growth. So we see that this becomes beneficial when you start to leverage behavioral data and behavioral actions that are kind of within that middle funnel that provide you with more data to leverage and more data to use instead of just focusing on that pointy blunt end for you to really optimize people towards that action. And for us at AdCloud and at Adobe, we really see this when people start to merge Adobe Analytics with AdCloud. We released a product recently where we're really feeding, it's a bidirectional sync across our products. We're feeding view-through data from AdCloud into Analytics. Analytics is really giving us that conversion data. We're leveraging it for weighted optimization, weighted objectives, and we see about a 13 to 18% lift in ROI when our clients start to integrate their analytics data with AdCloud and use it for their campaigns. So ultimately, the strategy, when you think about how you actually merge MarTech and AdTech and really where advertising sits within your business, is that it's all about data first. So if we go back to that slide I have of the teams and the technology and the columns and the rows, essentially it's putting data at the center first, right? And then from there, you start to think through and build out your audiences, whether that is leveraging a DMP that helps you build out profiles, or you're kind of using other ways in which to really build out your various audiences, whether those are your current customers versus non, et cetera, et cetera. From there, it's really serving them with the right creative. So you know who they are. Data is really at the center and the core of what you're doing. You're ensuring that they're receiving the right message. And essentially, it kind of bleeds out into whichever destination or execution in which you can meet them, which is across owned, paid, and also some earned executions that you can start to leverage. And on top of that, all those various teams, instead of them sitting in their own sort of silo that layer on top of one another, essentially they all are surrounding and are a part of that integrated strategy. And they are really supporting that data at the core, audience, and then creative mindset that executes across all these destinations. For us at Adobe, this does represent all of our various products and ways in which our clients and advertisers can start to really think outside just advertising across business, and marketers can really think outside marketing. And it really allows our clients to really start to leverage our products in an integrated fashion across our full tech stack that we have available. We call this at Adobe, while I represent AdCloud, really what we're talking about is advertising in the experience era. For us at Adobe, that represents our omni-channel DSP, which is AdCloud, the AdCloud product. Our integrations that we're building with the Creative Cloud, which is where Adobe's heritage is, but we also know that that's a really important piece to advertising, so we're focused on how we innovate there. And then finally, everything that we do is built on what we call our experience platform. which is allowing people to start to think about their data as an integrated piece of their overall business, instead of just thinking about advertising and marketing as separate. And so if I kind of leave you guys with one thing, I think overall, I hope that you understand that connected is really what advertising should be. It shouldn't sit in a silo. Data really does need to kind of converge across all of these various areas. And for you guys as brands and for you companies, this is really how you start to innovate and push your business forward. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was really, really interesting. Thanks.
Thanks.
So, any questions, guys? This is the last session before you're going to the main station. Yeah, hi, you're leaving. Main stage, and then there is drinks afterwards. I think it's Teets who is paying today. Yeah, we like it. Any questions? You have everything under control with your AdTech and MarTech. That's good.
Everyone agrees with me? Nobody disagrees? Okay. Nobody's gonna, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, oh, we have a question.
Are you from Adobe? then you cannot, no.
Okay, all of this is really great. But if I was a brand, yes, I'm from Adobe, but if I was a brand, what would you say is, the first step? What should I do?
What? To do this correctly, I actually think the tech stack exercise is actually a good first step. It can be a little tough because it's helped brands understand kind of where, how maybe decentralized their business is. You have some decisions that are made by procurement, and the analytics teams are doing these things, and then advertising is doing this, and someone else has made this decision. And so when you actually start to understand what your full tech stack looks like, and kind of who's owning what, who manages what, I think it's an amazing first step. And then you start to think about, well, do these technologies, all of these technologies actually speak to one another to do what I want them to do? I guess maybe the good first step is actually to kind of build out your strategy. Maybe that's a good one. But I think the tech stack exercise is a really, really important one. I would also say it's really important when people go on this journey that you understand that this is not going to happen overnight. It's going to require talent and kind of buy-in internally. Everything is not going to be perfect, but it's the right thing to do. And so I've seen some brands kind of stop, it doesn't work, or start, it doesn't work, they stop, they kind of move away from it. And I would say that's building a culture that is afraid of failure and doesn't let people explore is also probably one of the biggest detriments to innovating your business. So.
Are you also from Adobe? No, exactly, I know. Mrs. Shell, here you go.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask this question offline, but I know what it's like presenting and then you have a sea of quiet. So, and this may be a slightly unfair question to ask the product marketing manager, but the technology is one component. Obviously, making sure your data landscape is sound, and then you put the technology. But a lot of the times where things fail is the operating model behind it. Yeah. So, does Adobe have, bringing in the ad tech and the MarTech stack? Do Adobe have different views around operating models, how these things could be operated? Because you're going to get the same fragmentation in operations as well. Mm-hmm. And does Adobe also then sort of say, these are the different types of ways you can operate when you sort of start combining the stacks?
So do you mean from like a managed service perspective or in-house or just overall operation?
Yeah, I mean, you probably have a few different models.
Yeah.
And you have lots of experience with different clients around how they have set up their operational landscapes.
Yeah. What we like to do, and this is something we see kind of I would say, trends in terms of the management of the technology, whether that's kind of a hybrid model with an agency, going fully in-house, or even leveraging a partner to just kind of do it yourself. And then from like a tactical, actually setting it up perspective, we've spent a lot of time providing tools and information for how you actually do it, because technology is only as good as the people that are using it. So we're not just throwing stuff at like people and then saying, well, bye, you bought it, thank you. So for us, one thing that we are really focused on from the ad cloud perspective in advertising, and this is something I've been working on, we're looking across our entire product suite, and we're saying, what are the advertising related and the marketing related functions and features? And then what does a true full tech stack training plan look like so that people can kind of get off the ground and running? And we kind of build also, I would say, not only swim lanes, but also, I would say, timelines based on what we see on average. But the one thing that I do say is that no client has ever been the same, so it's always been different, but we do like to provide best practices. And we have some great relationships with many of our clients who will actually talk to different brands one-on-one and kind of let you know what they've done as well without us in the room.
More questions? Otherwise, in 10 minutes, back to the main stage. There is a little bit more content, and then drinks and gala, or whatever you're going to do. So thank you from me and Adform for letting us host you here today. Enjoy the rest of the conference and talk later. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.